quick demo of this video tutorial. In this video, we will build a web API in Asp Net Core with Angular 7. Inside that, we will implement CRUD operations using Entity Framework Core and SQL Server DB. So here we have the final output of the project. Inside that, we can do operations like insert, update, delete, and retrieve on payment details like credit card or debit card. If you want to insert a new record, first of all, we have to populate this form here. Here we have the expiration date. Finally, we have the security code CVV. Inside this form, we have implemented form validation also. Now, in order to insert this record, click on this submit button here. So here we have inserted corresponding payment detail for Angelica Ramos. In order to update your record, you can select the row. Corresponding details will be populated inside the form here. Now let's update this name here. Now submit the form. So here we have updated corresponding record. Now in order to delete a record, you can click on this trash icon here. Then we have to confirm the operation. Click on OK. So here we have deleted corresponding record from the application. So inside this application, we have discussed a lot of things regarding Asp Net Core and Angular client side. I'm sure you will find this tutorial helpful for your upcoming projects. So please watch till the end of this video tutorial. Before starting this video, I would like to ask you a favor. If you found this video helpful, please thumbs up this video. If you are new here, please be subscribed to this channel and click on the bell icon to get notification about my new videos. Most of the video lesson here also has a written blog post. You can find the link in video description. You can grab code from there as well. What's up YouTube? Welcome to CodAffection. In this video, I'm going to implement CRUD operations with Asp Net Core Web API project in Angular 7. I have already published a video on implementing CRUD operations with traditional Asp .NET Web API project. I have given the link in video description. In that video, most of you have requested me to make .NET Core version with Entity Framework Core. So that is what we are going to do inside this video. Before starting this video tutorial, I would like to thank for your PayPal donations for my previous works. In order to make more helpful and quality tutorials like this, you can support me through PayPal donations. I have given the donation link in first comment and video description. Without further ado, let's get started. First of all, let's look how to build Web API with Asp Net Core. This is my Visual Studio 2017. First of all, let's create the web API in Asp Net Core. So go to File, then New, then Project, or you can use the shortcut Ctrl-Shift-N. From the left panel, select .NET Core under Visual C#, then select Asp .NET Core Web Application. Then name your application here. I will name it as Web API. Then select the location where you want to save this application. Click on OK. At the top, make sure that you have selected .NET Core and latest version of Asp .NET Core. Then I will select this template API. I will uncheck this configuration option for HTTPS. Leave other options as it is. Click on OK. So here we have created a brand new web API in Asp .NET Core. In previous video, we have already discussed Asp .NET Core in brief, though I will give you an overview of this .NET Core project. First of all, here we have the program.cs file. Inside that, we have this static void main function. You must have seen this function if you are familiar with C# console application. This is the starting function for whole project. First of all, here we have called this function create web host builder, which in turn call this startup class, which is defined inside this startup.cs file here. Inside this class, we have mainly two functions. First of all, we have configuration services function. After that, we have this configure function. Inside this configure services function, we will add services for this .NET Core application. So here we have added this service MVC into this service object of the type iService collection. So without this service MVC, this .NET Core application will be a plain console application. This MVC service makes this .NET Core application into a web application. And inside this configure function, we will do the further configuration for this project. Here we have set the exception page based on the running environment. And with this use MVC function, we can do the further configuration for the project. Now let's start coding. Like you have seen in quick demo of this video, we are going to do CRUD operations on payment details for credit card or debit card. You might have seen this feature in many of the e-commerce applications. So let's look how we can do that. First of all, let's define the model for this project. For that, I'm going to add a new folder inside this project. Add new folder. I will name this folder as models. To get started with the model, we have to create a DB context class. So right click on this models folder here, then add class. I will name this class as payment detail context. Click on add. We will design the model using Entity Framework Core DB first approach. So right click on this project, then click on manage and NuGet packages. Switch to Browse tab, then search for Microsoft Entity Framework Core. Select the same version as that of the Asp Net Core. So I will select this 2.2 version. Click on install. So here we have installed the package successfully. Now back to the DB context class. Here we have to inherit this class from DB context from Entity Framework Core. DB context. We have to add the corresponding using statement, so you can use the shortcut control period, then click on this using statement Microsoft Entity Framework Core. Now let's add a constructor for this class, so you can use this snippet CTOR, then double tab. Now for this constructor, we have a single parameter DB context options of the type payment detail context. I will name this parameter as options. After that, we have to call the parent constructor. So base into that, we can pass this options parameter. I will explain why do we need this constructor with this specific constructor parameter after creating one controller inside this project. Now we have to define the model for payment detail entity or table. So let's add one more class here. Add class. I will name this class as payment detail. Click on add. Now let's define required properties for the entity. First of all, we have ID property for this entity, PMID. After that, we need one more property for card owner name. So I will name this as card owner name. Then we need one property for card number, string card number. Then we need a property for expiration date, string expiration date. Finally, we have CVV number. For this entity, I will use this PMID as the primary key, so we can use this attribute key. For that, we have to use this using statement system.componentModel.data annotations. As you know, all of these properties here are mandatory to insert a payment detail. So you want to make all of these properties required, so we can add this attribute required here. Let me copy and paste for remaining properties also. Now, when we create the SQL Server table for this model, columns corresponding to the string properties will have the data type nvarchar max, which is more than what we need. So we have to set the appropriate data type for string properties. We can use this attribute column. For that, we have to use this namespace data annotations.schema. Inside that we can set this type name is equal to nvarchar 100. Now let's do the same for remaining properties. After card owner we have card number. I assume that card number will have 16 digits internationally, so I will set the data type as varchar 16. Then we have the expiration date. For expiration date we will have the format like this: 2 digits for month, then /, then 2 digits for year. So this property will have 5 characters, so I will set the data type as varchar 5. And finally we have the 3-digit CVV security number, so I will set the data type as varchar 3. Now we have done with defining this entity payment detail. Now let's add this entity into this DB context here. For that we just need to add a property outside this constructor of the type dbSet. So here we have the property with type dbSet for this class payment detail. I will name this property as payment details. Now we have completed with defining model for this project. Here we have the constructor parameter db context options as options. Into this parameter we have to pass informations like DB provider. It might be SQL Server, MySQL, PostgreSQL, etc. Along with that we have to pass the connection string for the DB. So let's look how we can pass those values into this constructor parameter. For that we are going to use dependency injection in Asp Net Core. And we can pass from this class here startup, where we have the function configuration services. Like we have added this MVC as a service into this services type of the collection iService collection, we can add a DB service or DB context service into this services here. Services dot add DB context. It is of the type payment detail context. We have to use this model namespace here, and into this function we have to pass both DB provider and connection string. For that I will use this lambda expression here with options dot use SQL Server function can be called for specifying the DB provider. Use SQL Server. For that we have to use this namespace entity framework core. Inside that we can provide the connection string. So first of all we have to save the connection string inside this app settings.json file here. I will add connection strings here. Connection strings. Inside that we can have as much as connections for this project. We are going to have a connection for development. So I will name this connection as dev connection. Sorry, here we have extra n. Then connection string will be something like this. Server is equal to local, then /. We have to use 2 /. And we have the SQL Server instance name SQL Express, then followed by database name. Database is equal to, I will name this database as payment detail DB. Then we will connect the database using Windows authentication mode. So we can set this trusted underscore connection is equal to true. In order to execute multiple batches of query with a single connection, we have to set one more keyword here, multiple active result sets is equal to true. Sorry, here we have a typo. local. That's it. Now back to this startup class here. Now we have to access that connection string inside this function. For that, we can use this configuration property here. So we just need to do this configuration dot get connection string function can be called. Inside that, we have to provide the connection name that we have mentioned here, dev connection. Let me copy this and pasting here. I will explain how this dependency injection works once we create the controller for this payment detail class. Before that, let's create the database using this DB model that we have defined here. For that, go to Package Manager console. For me, here we have the Package Manager console. If you can't see Package Manager console in your Visual Studio here, you can select the project from Solution Explorer, then go to Tools, then NuGet Package Manager, then we have the Package Manager console here. First of all, we have to create the migration. So just execute this command add dash migration, and we have to provide a migration name. I will set it as initial create. Hit enter. As a result of this command execution, here we have the new folder migrations with respective C# files. Now in order to create the actual database, we just need to execute this command update dash database, hit enter. Since we have executed this command successfully, they should have a new database. Let me check that in my management studio here. Expand this database node here. So here we have the new database, payment detail DB. We have given this name inside the connection string here, payment detail DB. Inside that, we should have a table, payment details. Let me check the table design. Inside the table, we have columns corresponding to these properties that we have defined inside the payment detail class. So first of all, we have the ID or primary key for the table, PMID. You can see that it is already set as the identity specification for the table. It will start from 1 and incremented by 1. We don't have to insert values into the column. SQL Server will take care of that. Then followed by card owner name, then card number, expiration date, CVV security code. Since we have set required attribute for these string properties here, these columns will not allow null. So Entity Framework Core created the database as we expected. Now back to the project. Now let's create a web API controller for this payment detail class here. For that, right click on controllers folder, then add controller. I will select this template API controller with actions using Entity Framework. Click on add. For model class, I will select the payment detail class, then context will be payment detail context. I will name this controller as payment detail controller. Click on add. As a result of MVC scaffolding mechanism, here we have created the controller payment detail, which is inherited from the base class controller base. Inside that, we have required web API method to implement the CRUD operations. Before getting into the details, let's discuss how the dependency injection works. Here you can see the controller constructor payment detail controller with a single parameter context of the type payment detail context. And here we have the private property underscore context of the type payment detail context. Inside this constructor, we have set this private property underscore context using this constructor property context. Now, from where do we pass the value for this parameter? There comes the dependency injection. Inside this middleware function, configuration services, here we have added this DB context into the services variable here. So whenever we create a controller with constructor parameter of the type payment detail context, this iService collection property services will provide the new instance of this payment detail context into this constructor parameter context. We don't have to create the instance of DB context class explicitly using new keyword like we used to do in previous ASP.NET applications. So this is one benefit of using dependency injection in our projects. Before ASP.NET Core, we were using third-party packages like Castle Windsor, AutoFac, etc. By default, ASP.NET Core implements dependency injection. Now back to the payment detail control here. Here we have set the routing for this controller with this URI, API /, then here we have the template for controller. This controller template will be replaced by the controller name, which is payment detail. As you can see for these web API methods here. Now let's discuss this web API method in brief. First of all, here we have the web API method get payment detail. It has the URI API / payment detail. It is of the type HTTP GET. It will return all the collection of payment details that we have saved inside the payment details table. After that, we have this web method get payment detail with this parameter ID. This is of the type HTTP GET. And here we have the URI parameter ID that should be passed after this / here. So from this web API method, it will return the corresponding payment detail with the given ID. For example, for this URI, it will return the payment detail for the ID 5. For this project development, we don't need this particular web method, so I will get rid of this web method from here. After that, we have the put payment detail web method. For this web method, we have two parameters, ID then payment detail. Inside this ID, we will have the ID of the record which is to be updated, and inside this parameter we will have the updated value of the record. For this web method, corresponding URI will be something like this, API / payment detail / then the corresponding ID. So value for this ID can be passed through the URI, and we will pass the value of this payment detail using body. We can discuss this web method in great detail while developing this application. After the put method, here we have the post web method, post employee details. It is used to insert a new payment detail. After that, we have the web method of the type HTTP delete. It is used to delete a corresponding payment detail. Okay, so these are the web API methods inside this controller. Now let's test the working of this application. For that, go to debug, then start without debugging, or you can use the shortcut Control F5. By default, this web API navigate inside this URI API / values, which is from the default controller here, values. Now let's check how we can access this exact web API method here, get payment details of the type HTTP GET. It should return all the payment details record from the table. For that, we will use a tool called Postman. Using this tool, we can verify the working of the web API before calling from the client application. So first of all, we are going to make a GET request, and corresponding URI will be something like this. Let me copy this and pasting here, API / then payment detail. Click on send. So currently it returns an empty array because inside this table payment detail we don't have any row. Now let's insert a new row manually. For that, right click on the table, then click on edit top 200 rows. Card owner name will be Fiona Green. Then card number 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 1 2 3 4 5 6. Expiration date 10 / 10. Then we have CVV number. It will be 123. Hit enter. So here we have one record for Fiona Green. Now let's make this request again. That's it. Here we have the payment detail for Fiona Green. Did you notice the JSON structure returned from the Web API method? Here we have a small issue. Here you can see that by default, Web API returned the JSON after camel casing. For this ID, we have provided capital PM, that you can see here, capital PM ID, but here we can see the result after camel casing. Then for this card owner, we have the capital C, then capital O, but here we have the small letter C. It is the result of camel casing. By default, Asp.NET Core JSON serializer will use the camel casing for these key values here. We don't need this conversion because it might cause some confusions when it comes to the client-side application Angular. Instead of that, we have to return these keys exactly as we have given inside this class here, that we can configure inside the middleware function inside this startup class here, configure services. Along with this add MVC function, we need to chain one more function invocation. It will be something like this: add JSON options. Inside that, we have to provide a lambda expression with this parameter options. First of all, I will define a variable var resolver is equal to options dot serializer settings dot contract resolver, and here we have the if clause to check whether this resolver is null or not. If it is not equal to null, we can do this. First of all, here we have the resolver and we have to cast this as default contract resolver. Default contract resolver. For that, we have to use this namespace JSON.serialization, and from this we can set this property naming strategy is equal to null. So it will nullify this extra conversion for these keys here. Now let me build this project again. For that, right click on this project, click on build. Now let's make this get request again. So here we have the JSON result with keys exactly similar to the C# properties that we have defined inside this payment detail class here. So here we have built a web API with Asp.NET Core. Now let's check how to consume these web API methods from Angular 7 application. Now let's create the Angular 7 project inside this folder directory where we have already created the web API project. In order to create the project, we have to execute few commands from Angular CLI. So we have to open the command prompt. For that, you can use this shortcut, hold shift, then right click. So here we have the option open command window here. In order to create the Angular project, you can run this Angular CLI command ng new, then application name. I will name this as Angular 7. Hit enter. Would you like to add Angular routing? No. Which style sheet format would you like to use? I will stick with CSS. So this command will take some time because it will install some default packages from npm. As a result of this command execution, here we have already created this project Angular 7. Finally, we have created the Angular 7 project with some default npm packages. Now for this Angular 7 project development, I will be using Visual Studio Code Editor. You can use the Visual Studio itself, but I would like to use Visual Studio Code Editor. In order to open this project inside Visual Studio Code Editor, you can right click here, then click on open with code, or you can open the IDE from command prompt itself. So first of all, we have to navigate inside the folder Angular 7. Then in order to open the VS Code editor from this location, you just need to execute this command code, then period or dot symbol. Hit enter. So here we have opened this Visual Studio Code editor from that particular folder directory. Now let's run this new Angular application. For that, I will be using integrated terminal from this IDE here. In order to run this application, you just need to type this command ng serve then $o. Hit enter. It will compile and run this application in your default web browser. So this is how the default Angular 7 application looks like. For the application development, I will be using Bootstrap and found our some icons. So first of all, go to the official website getbootstrap.com. Then click on this Get Started button here. We have to grab these CSS and JavaScript references into the project. So let me copy this CSS reference. Then back to the project, open index.html. Just about this head end tag, we can paste that CSS reference. Now let me copy this JavaScript reference. Then back to the file, just paste that about this body end tag here. Now let's add the phone over some icons. For that, you can go to this website phoneoversome.com. Click on this start using free button. Copy this link from here. Now we can paste that just below this Bootstrap style sheet. Now let's create required components, models, and service classes. Before that, I will show you the structure of the application that we want to build. For that, I will add a new txt file here, app structure.txt. I have already prepared the structure of the application. I will just paste that here. So for this application development, we will have the parent component payment details. Inside that, we will have the child components payment detail and payment detail list. And here we have the shared folder. Inside that, we have the service class payment detail and we have the model class payment detail. Now let's create these required files. For that, let me open one more terminal here. In order to create this parent component payment detail, we can use this Angular CLI command ng g4 generate c4 component. Here we have to provide the name of the component. I will just copy that from here and pasting here. If I execute this ng command, it will have these files. We will have a CSS file, an HTML file, a file with extension spec.ts, and the exact TypeScript file for the component. So these 4 files will be created. We don't need this file with extension spec.ts. So in order to remove that, we can use this flag spec and I will set it as false here. And also we don't need a separate component specific style sheet like this. You can see this style sheet reference inside this component TypeScript file here, styles URL. Instead of that, we will use the inline CSS array styles. Here we have to provide an array. So from now onwards, we don't need this component specific style sheet. I will remove that from here. And we don't need this file with extension spec.ts. So with this spec flag here, we can skip the creation of test file with extension spec.ts. And in order to use inline styles instead of creating separate style sheet files, we can add this flag here, inline dash style, or in short, you can use this double dash yes. Hit enter. So here we have created the component payment detail. So here is the corresponding folder payment details, and here we have the TypeScript file. Inside that we have the inline styles array, and here we have the required HTML file. We have skipped the creation of the spec file and creation of separate style sheet also. Now let me clear this terminal. For that, you can use this command clear. Now we have to create this style component payment detail. For that, I will use the previous command with few modifications. So here is the previous command. We have to create this new component payment detail inside this folder, payment details folder. So we have to do this payment details / then component name. I will copy this component name from here and pasting here. Now hit enter. newly created child component can be seen inside this payment details folder here. Like this, we have to create one more component for payment detail list component. So here we have the previous command. Now we have to create the component payment detail list. Hit enter. So here we have created all the components required for the application development. Now let's create required service and model files. Before that, let me clear this terminal from here. In order to create the service class, we can use this command ng g for generate, s for service. We have to create that service file inside this shared folder. So we have to do this shared / then service name will be payment detail. Let me copy this and pasting here. For this service file also, there will be a file with extension spec.ts for test purpose. We don't need that, so I will add this flag spec and I will set it as false. Hit enter. So here we have the folder shared. Inside that we have the service class for payment detail. Like this, we have to create one model class ng g for generate. Unfortunately, there is no specific command to create a model class in Angular. Instead of that, we can use few tweaks with class creation command. So ng g for generate, then we have to create a class. We can use CL in short. We have to create that inside this shared folder. Then class name will be payment -detail. So when we execute this command, there will be a file with this name paymentdetail.ts. Instead of that, we need a file with extension spec.ts. For that, we can use this flag here, type is equal to model. Hit enter. So here we have created the model class payment detail. Corresponding file is named as expected. Inside that we have this class payment detail. Now inside this class we have to add properties to represent a payment detail record. It will be almost similar to the class which we have defined here, payment detail. So all of these properties should be added into this class here. So first of all, we have the ID PM ID. It's of the type number. Like this, we have to add remaining properties also. So here we have added all the properties that we have inside this web API model here. Now let's start designing this application. Here we have the root HTML file index.html. Here we can see the component tag app root. So this tag will be replaced by the HTML from the root component of an Angular application app component. So here is the corresponding component HTML. So these codes here is responsible for the default view of the application here. So we can start developing this application from this app component HTML. So first of all, let me get rid of this default HTML from here. Then we will have the div with class container from Bootstrap. Inside that we have to show this component parent component HTML payment details component. So we have to add corresponding selector. Let me copy this and pasting here. Now we have to make a tag with this selector. So here we have the parent component HTML. First of all, I will add a div with class Jumbotron, which is a class from Bootstrap. We will show the heading for this application with h1 element. It will have few classes from Bootstrap, display, -4. Then we will have the class text-sender to align the text in sender. And I will name this application as payment detail register. After this heading, we need a horizontal line separation. So here we have the HR element. Below that, we will have the grid system from Bootstrap. So here we have the div with class row. First of all, we will have the column with 5 grid columns. So corresponding class will be called MD5. Like this, we need one more div it will have 7 columns from grid system. Inside this first div here, we have to show this child component HTML payment detail. So here is the corresponding component selector. Let me copy this and pasting here. Now let's make a tag with this selector, and inside the second column here we will show this payment detail list component. So here is the corresponding selector. Let me copy this and pasting here. Now let's make a tag with this selector. That's it. Now let me save all of these modifications. Back to the application here. So here we have the application name, payment detail register. Inside the first grid column, here we have the payment detail component, and here we have the second child component, payment detail list. Inside this payment detail component HTML, I will design the form for insert or update operation of the payment detail. For that, we will use this model class here, payment detail model. Before designing the form, I want to tell you one thing. Inside this application, if you want to share an instance of a class with multiple components, we are going to do this. We will inject that into this app module.ts file, and we will use that injected service instance in these components here. For example, we want to share this payment detail service class to be shared among these two components here, payment detail and payment detail list. In order to do that, first of all, we will inject this service class inside this app.module.ts file, and the same injected instance can be accessed from these two components here. So that is one of the best way to share an instance in an Angular application. So first of all, inside this service class here, like we have said, in order to design the form inside this payment detail component, we need to use the model class. And that property, model property, is to be shared among these two components here. So I'm going to do this. I will create a property of the type payment detail model inside this payment detail service here. So here is the property form data, which is of the type payment detail class. So here is the model class. If you click on this, corresponding import statement will be added at the top here. Now in order to access this form data property from these two child components here, first of all, we will inject this payment details service class inside this app.module.ts file here. We just need to add the class inside this providers array, and we have to add the corresponding import statement. For that, you can use the shortcut, hold Control, then press period or dot symbol, and here we have the corresponding import statement. It will be added at the top here. So here we have injected this payment details service class. In order to access this class from this payment detail component here, we just need to create a property, private service of the type payment detail service here. In this service class, we have a property form data of the type payment detail model. So inside this payment detail component HTML, first of all, we will have the form. Inside that, we don't need this action attribute here. Instead of that, first of all, I will add this local reference form, and I will set it as ng form. Inside this form, I want to prevent autocomplete or auto suggestion from previous form data. For that, we can set this autocomplete as off. First of all, inside the form, I will add the input control for card owner name. So here we have the div with class form hyphen group. Inside this div, we need a text box. So I will add this input control here, and I will set the class as form control from bootstrap. We don't need this type attribute here. By default, it will be text. Now after this class, I will set the placeholder card owner name. Now we have to set name, local reference, and two-way data binding for this control. So we have to provide the exact property name from the model class. So it would be better to open this component HTML and model class side by side. In Visual Studio Code Editor, you can use this split button here. It will split this window into two halves. Inside this first half, here we have the component HTML. Inside the second half, we can open the model class here. So here we have the property. Now let's add the name for this control. Name will be this one. Let me copy this and pasting here. Then we have to set the local reference card owner name, and which is equal to ng model. After that, we have to provide the two-way data binding. ng model is equal to, so it should be from the component property. So here we have the component TypeScript file here. Inside that we have this constructor property service. So we can do this service dot, inside this service we have this card owner name. Let me copy this and pasting here. So this is all we have. First of all, we have set the name attribute, and then we have the local reference, which is set as ng model. Then after that, we have the two-way data binding for the control. ng model is equal to service.card name. Now let's look how this form looks like. Before that, we have to do one more thing. Since we have designed this form using template-driven approach, we have to add corresponding module into this app module.ts file here. So here we have to import the class. I will have the import statement here from Angular /forms. We have to import forms module. Now let's add this class forms module inside this imports array here. Let me save all of these modifications here. Then back to the application. So here we have the input control for card owner. Along with this input control, I want to show the phone awesome icon as a prefix. So let's look how we can show the prefix icon with Bootstrap and phone awesome icon. So back to the component HTML here. For that, we will have this div with class input group, which is from Bootstrap input group. Inside that, we will have another div with class input hyphen group hyphen prepend. Inside that, we will have another div with class input then hyphen group hyphen text. And I want to show the background for this icon as white. So I will add this Bootstrap class bg hyphen white. Now inside this div here, we can show the appropriate phone awesome icon. So let me select a phone awesome icon. So go to the official website phoneawesome.com, then click on this free button here. Since we have a text box for card owner name, I will search for user. Then I will select this icon here. We can copy this whole I element with required class. Click on this. So here we have copied the HTML. Now back to the div. I will paste that here. Now we have to move this input control into this input group here. Let me save this. Then back to the application here. So here we have the control with appropriate phone awesome prefix. So other than this card owner name, we have these much properties: card number, expiration date, and CVV number. So let me copy this div 3 times just below this. Let me copy this and pasting 3 times here. After this card name, we will have card number. So we have to edit the corresponding properties here. Name, I will set it as card number, local reference, two-way data binding. Then we have the placeholder, card number. We have to select appropriate phone awesome icon. So let's search for card here. So I will select this icon. Let's grab this HTML and I will paste that here instead of this icon. After this card number, we have expiration date. So let's update corresponding attributes. Placeholder will be expiration date. Now let's select an appropriate phone over some icon. I will search for calendar. I will select this icon. Let me copy this I tag from here and I will replace that here. After this expiration date, we have CVV. So here we have the corresponding input control. Let me update the corresponding attributes. Now let's select a phone over some icon for this security number CVV. For that, I will search for something password, and I will select this icon here, copy, then replace the I tag here. Since this CVV is a security number, we have to set this input control type as password, so that characters entered into this input control will be displayed as a sequence of dots or asterisk marks based on the browser you are using. Now after all of this input control, we need a submit button. So I will add this div here with class form-group. Inside that we have the button of the type submit. Button text will be submit. For this button, we need to add few classes from Bootstrap. First of all, we have btn, then btn-success. And this button will be larger than from the normal button. So we will add this class btn-lg. And in order to expand this button to the parent div here, we can add this class btn-block. And for this button also, we need to add a phone over some icon. So better I will search for save. Instead of that, we will use something different. Database. I will use this one. Let me copy this. Back to the HTML. I will paste that just before this submit text. Let me save all of these modifications. Back to the application here. Boom. So here we have the form to insert or update payment detail record. Sorry, I'm not a man of perfection, though I want to show these two input controls in a single line, because these two input controls will not have that much characters. This expiration date will be of the type mm/yy. So instead of this placeholder, we can set that here. It will be here, expiration date, and I will set this placeholder as capital MM/YY. Save, then back to the application. That's it. So this input control will have 5 characters, and this CVV input control will have 3-digit security number. So we can show them in a single line. We just need to do this. I will add an extra div here with class form-row, and we will enclose these two form groups with this form row div. Okay, that's it. And this first form group div for expiration date will take 7 columns from the row. So we have to add this class call empty7, and for this CVV div here, we will have 5 columns, call empty5. Let me save this and back to the application. So here it is. So here we have to implement validations for these controls. All of these controls is mandatory. So first of all, we have to set these form controls as required. So back to the component HTML, we have to add this attribute required to all of these input controls here. Required, let me copy this. Now let's paste that for remaining input controls also. We have card number, then we have expiration date, then we have the CVV password. other than this required validation, we have to set limitation on character length inside these input controls here. For card number, in my knowledge, it should be 16 characters. So I will set that length validation for this card number here. So we just need to do this max length is equal to 16 and mil length is also 16. Actually, instead of this card number placeholder, we can say 16-digit card number. So like that, we have to set validation on these two input controls also. So here we have expiration date. Let me copy this and pasting here for expiration date. It should have 5 characters. And for the CVV input control, it should have 3 characters. Now, if someone enters invalid data into these form controls here, we have to show proper validation error indications. So let's look how we can do that. If you inspect these input controls here, we have a few classes which starts with ng dash, ng pristine, ng invalid, and ng touched. ng pristine means there is no change from its initial value. ng invalid means this control is invalid based on the validations that we have provided inside the form here. And here we have the final class ng touched, which means whether the user is visited this control or not. Now let me enter a few random characters inside this text box here. At the same time, you can see the updates inside this class list here. So here we have replaced ng pristine with ng dirty, means there is a change from its default value, and ng invalid is replaced with ng valid because since we have few characters inside this control, currently this control is valid. So based on this presence or absence of these ng classes, we can show validation error indications. For that, back to the project, then open the global style sheet, styles.css. If there is an input control with these two classes, ng touched and ng invalid, we will apply this border color. If the control has this ng valid class, it means the control is valid. In that case, we will apply this border color. Let me save all of these modifications here. Then back to the application. Let me inspect this input control. Currently, this input control has these two classes, ng invalid and ng touched. And thereby, we have applied this CSS rule here. Now, if I enter something inside that, we have this green border, which is shown as the result of this CSS rule here. Now, if you want to show validation error indication for these prepend icons also, you can do that with conditional clause in Angular. So back to the project, then open the corresponding component HTML. So here we have the prepend icon for the card owner. Now let's look how to apply validation error indication for these icons also. For that, we will use the conditional class directive class dot green dash icon. We will apply this class whenever this card name control is valid. So we have to use this local reference card owner name dot valid. We will apply one more class red icon whenever the control is invalid. So this is what we do. Instead of this class green icon, we will have red icon class, and we will apply this class whenever this control is invalid and it is touched. Card owner name dot touched. We have to apply these classes for remaining prepend icons also. So let me copy this conditional class directive from here and pasting here for card number. Then we have expiration date, then CVV number, Now we have to modify the corresponding input control local reference. I will show you one VS Code editor shortcut to select these card owner name here. So hold Control then press D. So here we have selected this word card owner name. Now if you press D while holding this control, you can see that the next word card owner name is selected. You can see the cursor on both of these words here. If I do that once again, we will select the next card owner name. So instead of this card owner name, we have to have card number. So let's type that here, card number. Now let's do the same for remaining class directives also. So here we have expiration date. So place the cursor on the first word card owner name, then hold Control, then press D. So here we have selected all of these three words. Now we have to replace that with expiration date. Now let's do that for CVV. Hold Control, then press D twice and thrice. Instead of this, we have CVV. Okay, so here we have applied these two classes, green icon or red icon, based on the conditions that we have applied here. Now we have to define these two classes inside this styles.css here. With those two classes, we just meant to change the text color to green or red. Okay, let me save all of these modifications here. Then back to the application. So here we have visited this first control, then move to next control. So this control is invalid, and thereby we have applied this red border around the control, and also we have changed this icon text to red. Now let's fill that with few characters. So here we have changed the border of this control, and we have changed this icon text also. You can see the same for this card number. Then we have expiration date. CVV should contain 3 characters. Now finally, I want to disable this submit button when this form as a whole is not valid. For that, back to the HTML here, we will apply this attribute disabled whenever this form here, this form is not valid. So we can use this local reference form, and we just need to do this. We will have this condition, form is invalid. So when form is invalid, we will disable this submit button. Let me save this. Back to the application. Initially we have this blurred submit button because it is disabled. Now if you populate this form with proper data, this submit button will be enabled. Now let's look how to submit this form. Before that, I want to create a function to reset these form controls to their default values. So back to the component TypeScript file here. Inside that, I will define a new function, reset form. It has a single parameter, form. It's of the type ng form. We have to import this class from Angular Forms. You just need to click on this item here. It will add the corresponding import statement at the top. Inside the function, first of all, we will do this form.reset form function can be called, and then we have to reset this payment details service property form data. So we can do this dot service dot form data is equal to, we will provide a new object of the type payment detail model. So first of all, we have PMID. I will set it as 0. Then we have, instead of equal symbol, we have to use colon. Then we have card owner name. It will be empty string. Then we have card number. It will be empty string. Then we have expiration date. Then we have CVV number. Now we have to call this function inside this ng on a lifecycle hook here. So we just need to do this dot reset form function can be called here. And here we don't have a value for this form parameter, so I have to make this form parameter as nullable, and I will add an if clause here. We only need to call this reset form function when we have a value for this form parameter. So we will do this if form. So I will check this. If this form parameter is not null, we will call this reset form function. Otherwise, we just need to reset this form values. Now let's handle this form submission here. So here we have the component HTML. Inside this form, I'm going to wire up a submit event. So submit, whenever we submit this form, we will call another function on submit. Into that, we have to pass this form local reference form. Now we have to define this function on submit inside this TypeScript file here. On submit with a single parameter form of the type ng form. So when users submit this form, this function on submit will be invoked. Inside this form parameter, we will have the values inside these form controls. In order to retrieve that, we just need to access this property form.value. Inside this, we will have a JSON object containing values from these form controls. So we have to submit this form data into this web API project here. We will consume this payment detail controller HTTP post web method here. This one. This will insert the new record based on the given details. So let's look how we can do that. I'm going to define a new function inside the payment details service class here. Here we have the function post payment detail. For this function, we have a single parameter form data. It's of the type payment detail model class. Inside the function, we just need to make the HTTP post request to this web API method here. For that, we are going to use HTTP client class. So first of all, I'm going to import the class here, import statement, and we are going to import that from Angular common /HTTP, and we have to import HTTP client. Now we have to inject this inside this constructor here. So private HTTP of the type HTTP client. In order to use this class here, we have to add the corresponding module HTTP client module inside the app module.ts file here. So let me copy this import statement, and we can reuse that with few modifications. For the module, we have to import HTTP client module, and we have to add this class inside this imports array here. Now back to the service class. Now here we have the function. In order to make the post request, we just need to do this dot HTTP dot post function can be called. Into that, we have to pass this parameter value form data. As a first parameter to this function, we have to pass the corresponding URI for this web method here. We are running this web API method at this port number here. So let me copy this, and I'm going to define a new property here. It will be a read-only property. I will name it as root URL, and I will paste that here. Now we can do this. This dot root URL contains the base URI for the web method. Into that, we can concat this payment detail / payment detail. So this will post the form data into the web API method of the type HTTP post. Finally, this post function will return an observable. So from this post payment detail function, we just need to return that observable, so that we can access the observable inside this component TypeScript file here. So here we will call the new function this dot service dot post payment detail. Into that we have to pass the value. So form dot value property can be passed. Instead of valid we have value property, and from this function we have returned an observable. So we can subscribe to that here. Subscribe. Here we have the success function. After that we have the error function also. If there is any error, we will print that inside the console window. So we can do this console dot log, and we will print this error object. If the post operation is successful, we have to reset these form controls to their initial state. So we will call this reset form function. This dot reset form function can be called, and we can pass the form object here. Now let's look what we have inside this HTTP post web method here. We will pass the form data into this variable of the type payment detail model, and here we have the private DB context variable underscore context. We have initialized this context during the constructor of this controller through dependency injection. We have already discussed that before, and inside the DB context we have this DB set payment details, and we will add this new object into the DB set. And finally we just need to call this save changes function of the type asynchronous. And here we have the return statement with this function created action, means this function will return a status code 2.1, means a new resource or new record is inserted at the server side. Inside the function as a parameter we have returned the new payment detail ID with the corresponding payment details. Now we have one problem to access Web API method from this Asp Net Core project from this Angular 7. Means this Web API project will block requests from another application which is hosted in a different port number or different domain. In this case we are running this Angular 7 in a different port number. So this feature in Web API project is called Cross Origin Resource Sharing, or CORS. C-O-R-S. In order to consume Web API methods from this Asp.NET Core project from this Angular 7, we have to enable CORS for this Angular 7 project inside this Web API project here. In order to enable CORS inside this Asp.NET Core project, we are going to use a NuGet package. So right click on this project here, then manage NuGet packages. Then inside this browse tab you can search for this package, Microsoft Asp.NET Core CORS package. So let's install this package. So here we have successfully installed the package. Make sure that we have selected the same version as that of Asp.NET Core. Now open startup.cs file here. Then inside this configuration services function we have to add that as a service. So we just need to do this. Services.add CORS function can be called. In order to configure that for the Angular project, we can use this configure function here. We have to configure this CORS package before this use MVC function. So we can do this app.use CORS. Inside the function we will have a lambda expression with the parameter options. Then we have options dot with origins. So inside this function we have to specify the origin of this Angular 7 project. So I will copy this and back to the project, then I will paste that here. Make sure to remove this / at the end. After this with origins function we have to call few more functions. Allow any method. It will allow any method like post, get, delete, etc. And we have to allow all headers also. So allow any header. So this Asp.NET Core Web API project is ready to accept the HTTP request from this Angular 7 project here. Now let's build this project in order to apply the new changes. Build solution. Now back to the Angular 7 project, we have this service function to make the post request. Sorry, we have to remove this / from here. Let me save all of these modifications. Then back to the Angular 7 project here, I will try to insert a new payment detail here. Now let's submit the form. Here we have an error. Let's check that inside this console. It is of the type 500 internal server error. Let's check this error object. Here we have the detailed error. If you want to see that, right click on this, then store as global variable. So here we have the error with HTML document format. No route matches the supplied values. Here we have made the request /API /payment detail. That's right, and here we have the parameter payment detail. Into that we have to pass these property values. Let's check that inside the form here. We have added input controls for these properties. Yes, we don't have an input control for this property PMID inside the form. Currently inside this form.value will have the PMID, but its value will be null. So during insert operation, this PMID should be 0. In order to do that, we have reset the property 0 during ng on a lifecycle hook. In order to pass that during form submission, we have to have an input control for PMID here, which should be hidden. We don't need to show that to the user. So input of the type hidden, and we are going to bind this control using one-way data binding. For other input controls, we have used two-way data binding. Since we have a hidden field here, we don't need to do the two-way data binding. Instead, I will do one-way data binding using this value attribute here. We just need to do this service dot form data dot PMID. So this is how we can bind value of an input control using one-way data binding. For other non-hidden fields, we have used two-way data binding with local reference and this ng model attribute. Actually, here we have a typo with two-way data binding. We have to bind these properties from this form data inside this service object. So let me correct that for two-way data binding inside this form. Now let's look, is there any other problem inside the web API method here? When we call this function will return a 2.1 status code back. So here we have another problem. This first parameter should be a name of web method inside the project. We have deleted this web method. Actually, this function is trying to return the status 2.1 with the URI of newly created record. So let's bring that function back here. So here we have the web API method get payment detail. Inside that function, we have a single parameter ID for the corresponding record. So that value is passed inside this anonymous object here. And inside this last parameter, we will have the details of newly inserted record. Now let's build this project again. Back to the project, let me populate this form again. Now let's submit the form. Boom, since form is reset to its initial state, the record should be inserted at the server side. Let's check that inside the management studio. Right click on this table, then select top 1000 rows. So here we have the payment detail for Benjamin Franklin. Now let's look how we can show notification message after operations like insert, update and delete, like saved successfully or deleted successfully. For that, we are going to use npm package. So go to the website npmjs.com and we are going to use the package ngx toaster, which we have used in previous Angular applications also. In order to install this package, you just need to run this command here. Let me copy this, Back to the project, let me open one more terminal and I will paste the command here, hit enter. So here we have successfully installed the package. Now let's look how to use this package. Back to the package documentation here, we have to use these two modules here, browser animations and ngx toaster. So let me copy these two import statements from here, then open app.module.ts file here. I will paste those two import statements here. Then we have to add these two classes inside this imports array here. First of all, we have browser animations module, then we have toaster module. From this toaster module, we have to call this for root function. Now finally, we have one style sheet for this ngx toaster package. So here is the style sheet toaster.css from this directory, node modules. Then inside that we have this new folder for ngx toaster. Now we have to mention that inside the angular.json file. So here is the file angular.json, then search for styles. Inside this styles array, we just need to add this style sheet reference. Now let's look how to use this package after this form submission here. So back to the component, payment detail component. So first of all, we have to inject the toaster service inside this component constructor. So private toaster, which is of the type toaster service. Click on this, it will add the corresponding import statement at the top. Then we just need to do this. After this reset form function, we will call this dot toaster dot success function can be called. As a first parameter, we have the notification message submitted successfully. As a second parameter, we can provide the application name, which is payment detail register. So this is all we need to do to show a toaster notification. Because of the latest version of Bootstrap, we have to set the opacity of the toaster div to 1. So let's do that inside this styles.css here. I will set this div opacity to 1. Before testing these new updates, we have to restart this program because we have made changes outside the src folder, which is inside this file angular.json. In order to restart this program, just use the shortcut Ctrl+C, then type Y for yes. Before restarting this program, let's save all of these modifications. In order to restart this program, you can use this command ngserve --o again. Now let's look how the notification looks like. For that, I'm going to insert one more payment detail here. Now let's submit the form. So here we have the notification message submitted successfully. Now let's check the database. Let me execute this select statement again. So here we have the new record for Ashton Cox. Now let's look how we can list these payment details inside this second div here. That is inside this component payment detail list. For that, we can consume this web API method here, get payment details of the type get. Inside that, we have returned the payment detail list. Now let's look how to consume this inside this Angular 7 project. For that, let's open this service class here. I will name this function as refresh list. Inside this function, we can do this dot http dot. Since we have a get web API method, we can call this get function here. As a first parameter, we have to pass the corresponding URI, which is here API/payment detail. So I will copy this URI from here, then paste that inside this. This get function returns an observable. I will convert that observable into a promise. So we just need to call this toPromise function. Into this function, we can change this function called then. Inside the function, we can pass this callback function with a single parameter response. We just need to save the returned list in a property here. So I will define the property list. which is an array of the type payment detail. Payment detail. Now we can set the property here. This dot list is equal to response, and we have to convert this as payment detail array. Let me copy this and paste in here. Now using this list property, we can show a table to list all of the payment details inside this second div here. So open corresponding component TypeScript file here, payment detail list. First of all, we have to have a private property of the service, private service, which is of the type payment detail service. First of all, we have to populate this list property. For that, we can call this refresh list function inside the component ng on a lifecycle hook here. So we can do this dot service dot refresh list function can be called here. Now using the list property, we can design the HTML table inside the corresponding HTML file here. Instead of this default text here, we need a table with few classes from Bootstrap table. Then we need one more class, table dash hover. It will apply a gray background color when we hover on table rows. In order to show payment details, we just need to iterate through this service property list. So we can do this. Here we have the tr element, and we are going to iterate through the list using ng for directive from Angular star ng4 is equal to let payment detail, in short pd, of. Inside the component TypeScript file, we have injected the service as service. Inside that, we have this list property. Inside this tr element, we can add td elements for each of the payment details. We will display them using string interpolation. So we have two pair of curly braces, pd dot. First of all, we have the owner name, so card owner name. Then after that, we have card number. After that, we have expiration date. We don't have to show the security number CVV. Let me save all of these modifications here. Back to the application. Boom. So here we have listed all of the payment details that we have inserted so far. Now I want to add one more CSS rule. When we hover on these table rows here, we have to show hand symbol or pointer cursor. For that, you can add this rule inside the styles.css here. We will set this cursor as pointer when we hover on the table rows. Now back to the application. Next, we are going to implement update operation. For that, first of all, user will select a record for update operation by clicking on any of these rows. Corresponding record details will be populated inside these form controls. For that, we just need to add a click event for TD cells inside the table. So here is the corresponding component HTML. I will add a click event here. Click equal to, we will call a function populate form. Into the function, we can pass the payment detail object PD. Now let me copy paste the same function for remaining TD cell click event. Now back to the component TypeScript file, we need to define the function populate form. So here we have the function populate form. For this function, we have a single parameter PD of the type payment detail model class. Inside the function, we need to populate the corresponding records inside this form. We have designed this form using the service class property form data that you can see here, form data. In order to update these form controls with the selected record details, we just need to update this property form data. So this is all we need to do. This dot service dot form data is equal to PD. Let me save this. Back to the application here. Click on this row. So here we have populated selected raw details inside the form. Now we have a small issue. If you edit any of these form control values, at the same time you can see the changes inside this table also. We need to prevent this update inside this table before the form submission. It is because of the direct assignment here. Instead of this, we need to make a copy of this object and then assign to this property. So we can do this. Object dot assign function can be called. As a first parameter, we have to pass the target. I will pass the empty object. We have the target on the left side of assignment, so we can pass an empty object here, and we have to copy this PD object. Save. Back to the application. Let's check that again. If I edit this here, we have not updated the same inside the table. Now after selecting a record for update operation, user can make changes inside these form controls, then submit the form. We have already implemented insert operation with this same submit button. Inside the same function, we have to do update operation also. So here is the function on submit. Inside that we have implemented insert operation. Now we have to accommodate update operation also. In order to check whether we have an insert or update operation, we can check the input hidden field here, PMID. For update operation, it should have a non-zero value. Currently you can see that it has a value 1. If you select the second record here, it will be 2. Now if you reload this page, here we have the form for insert operation. Now its value should be 0. So based on the value of this PMID, we can decide whether we have an insert or update operation. For this insert operation, I will add this if clause form.value.PMID. If it is equal to 0, we will do the insert operation. I will move this insert operation into a separate function. So here is the function insert record. For this function, we will have a single parameter form of the type ng form. And let me cut these codes from here and pasting here. Now let's call that function here. This dot insert record. Into that we have to pass this form parameter value. In this else block, we can do the update operation. Inside this else block, we will do the update operation. For that, I'm going to define one more service function. It would be almost similar to this function. I will copy this and pasting below that using Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V combination. Or we have another VS Code shortcut. Just select the function, then hold Alt and Shift, then use the down keyword arrow. So here we can replicate this function as much as we want. Okay, I will rename this function. For update operation, we have to call this web API method here, put payment detail. For this function, we have to use the URI like this. It has two parameters, ID and payment detail. ID value can be passed through the URI, and we have to pass this payment detail through body. So let's look how we can do that. First of all, it will compare the ID parameter with the PMID inside this object. If they are not matching, it will return a bad request. If they match each other, first of all, it will set the entry state as modified, and then it will call the save changes function. If there is any error due to concurrency update operation, it will be handled inside this catch block here. If update operation is successful, it will return a 204 no content status code with this function no content. Now let's look how to consume this put web method from this Angular application. We just need to call this put function instead of post function here. And for the web API URI, we have to concat the ID here. So we can do this form data.PMID. As a second parameter, we can pass the value of this parameter payment detail. After the operation, it returns an observable. We have returned that observable from this function. Now let's call this function inside this else block. For this update operation also, I will define one more function like this insert record. We can just copy this and modify. So we can use the shortcut Alt Shift downward arrow, and I will name this function as update record, and instead of this service function we have put payment detail. After successful update operation, we will reset the form and we will show this same toaster notification message. Now we have to call this inside this else block here. I will copy this and pasting here. Instead of this function, we have update record. So instead of passing the value of ID from this form data variable, we can directly pass from this service object form data. So this is what we need to do, this dot form data dot pmid. So this is what we have done. We have provided the ID from this service property form data. That is what we have displayed inside this form controls here. So instead of passing this form data variable, we can use this form data from service. So this dot form data property can be passed. We don't need this form data here. Let me remove that, and I will remove that from this post function also. We can pass this service property form data. Now back to the component TypeScript file here. We don't need to pass this parameter value for this put and post function here. We can directly access that from this service property form data itself. And also we have to change this if condition here, this dot service dot form data dot pmid. Let me save all of these modifications here. Let's try the update operation. I will add few asterisk marks here, and I will change this expiration year, submit the form. So here we have updated the corresponding record. You can see the new, we have not updated this table list here. If you refresh this, you can see the updates, but we have to refresh this list after CRUD operations. So we can call the refresh list function after any of these operations. So we can call this dot service dot refresh list function can be called here. Let's do that inside this update operation also. And for this update operation, I will use a different style for toaster notification. So we can call this info function, save, back to the application. Let's update this. This time I will remove these asterisk marks here, submit the form. So here we have updated the record at the same time. Now we have the final CRUD operation delete. For that, I will add one more TD cell inside this table. So back to the list component HTML here. So here we have the TD cell, and inside this TD cell we will have a phone awesome icon. So here we have the I tag, and here we have the corresponding icon classes for, then for dash trash dash alt. In order to enlarge this icon from normal size, we can add this class for dash lg, and we want to show this icon in red color, so we can add this bootstrap class text danger, save, then back to the application. So here we have the delete icon. Let's add a click event for the icon, click, and I will call the function on delete. Into the function we just need to pass the pmid. Now let's define this on delete function inside the TypeScript file here. On delete with a single parameter pmid. For delete operation, we have to consume this web API method here, delete payment detail of the type http delete. Into that we have to pass the corresponding record ID. Inside the function, first of all we will find the record using this find async function using the given ID. If there is no such record, it will return the for not found response. If there is one, it will remove the particular record from the list. Finally, it will call the save changes function and it will return the corresponding record back. Now let's look how to consume this web API method. For that, we just need to define one more function inside this service class here. We will replicate this function. For that, we can use the same shortcut, hold Ctrl and Shift, then downward arrow, and I will name this function as delete payment detail. For this function, we have a single parameter ID and we have to consume this web API method here. Corresponding URI will be like this: API / payment detail / then corresponding ID. So it is similar to the put web method URI. So instead of this, we have to pass the function parameter ID. We don't need this form data here. Let me remove that. Instead of this put function, we need to call this delete function. From this delete operation also, we will return an observer. So back to the component TypeScript file here. We can call that service function here. This dot service dot delete payment detail. Into that, we have to pass the ID PM ID. Here we just need to subscribe to that return observer. Inside that, we will have an arrow function with response. After that, we have the error function. If anything went wrong, this error function will be called and we will console the error message, console.log. Inside that, we can pass this error object. If the operation is successful, we have to refresh this list here. So we can call the function refresh list. This dot service dot refresh list function can be called. After that, we have to show a tosser notification. So first of all, we have to inject the tosser service like we have done inside this component here. So I will add this private property. Let me copy this and pasting here. Now we have to add the corresponding import statement. For that, you can use the shortcut, hold Ctrl, then press period or dot symbol, then select the appropriate import statement. And we can do this. This dot toaster dot warning function can be called. As a first parameter, we can pass the message deleted successfully. As a second parameter, we can pass the name of the application. I will copy that from here. Now before this delete operation, we have to confirm this operation from user side. So we just need to add this if clause here, confirm. Inside this function, we will have a question: are you sure to delete this record? We will do this operation only when user confirm the operation. Let me save all of these modifications. Then back to the application here. Now let's delete this first record. Click on this trash icon. So here we have the confirmation. Are you sure to delete this record? Click on OK. So here we have deleted corresponding record from our DB that you can check inside this management studio. Let me execute this select statement again. So here we have deleted the corresponding first record. That's it guys, we have implemented Angular 7 CRUD operations in Asp Net Core Web API project. You can download this project source code from the link given below in video description. If you found this video helpful, please thumbs up this video, and for more awesome videos like this, you can subscribe to this channel CodAffection, and you can support this channel through PayPal donation. I have given the link in first comment and video description. Please like and share this video with your friends and colleagues so that they can benefit from this. Have a nice day. Bye.